Aveline was splitting the last of the winter wood when the riders came down her valley, and she did not stop swinging the axe, because in 12 years alone in the wilds she had learned that a woman who stops what she is doing at the first sign of men has already told them she is afraid. She heard them long before she saw them. The wilds had given her that, among the harder gifts, an ear tuned to every ordinary sound of her valley, so that anything not ordinary rang through it like a struck bell. And she knew from the sound that it was horses, several of them, shod, coming down the old drove track that no one used anymore, because no one came to the border wilds on purpose. She set another billet on the block, and split it clean, and set another, and split that, and let the riders come to her. Because this was her ground, 12 years hers, every stone and stream of it won by surviving what should have killed her, and she would not scurry off it like a rabbit for anyone. But she noted, without seeming to, where the axe would go if she needed it, and where the tree line was, and how many horses, and she kept her back to none of it, and she split her wood, and she waited. They came into the clearing in the last light, 6 riders, well-horsed and well-armed, the kind of men who did not belong within 50 leagues of a border hovel, and at their head, a man who made the animal part of Aveline, the part 12 wild years had sharpened to a blade, go very still and very watchful, because he was old blood. She knew it the way she knew weather coming. She had been born to a pack, before everything. She had the wolf in her too, though she had not let it loose in years, and it knew its own kind when it stood in front of it. And the man at the head of the riders was the oldest and strongest blood she had felt since the night they burned the mark on her wrist and drove her out to die. He was tall and hard and still in the saddle, and he looked at the woman splitting wood in the ruined light with an expression she could not read at all, that did not belong on the face of a lord who had ridden 6 armed men into a wilderness, an expression almost like grief, or almost like the ending of a very long search. Aveline, the man said. Not a question. He said her name the way you say a thing you have carried a long way, Aveline of Stagmere. And Aveline, who had not heard her own full name spoken aloud by another human being in 12 years, who had become in that time simply the woman in the valley to the few trappers who traded with her, and no one at all to the rest of the world, stood with the axe in her hands and felt something go through her that she had spent 12 years learning not to feel. Because Stagmere was the pack that had cast her out, Stagmere was the name of everything that had been taken from her, and no one had any business riding into her hard-won valley and laying that name on her like a hand on an old wound. "There's no one here of that name," she said. Her voice came rough, she used it little. "There's a woman splits her own wood, and troubles no one, and would be obliged if 6 armed men would water their horses somewhere else. Stagmere's a long way east. You've ridden wrong." "I've ridden 12 years wrong if the ledger's honest," the man said, and swung down off his horse, slow, keeping his hands where she could see them, the way you move near a wild thing you don't want to spook. "And I've come a long way to ride right. My name is Torin. I'm the Alpha King of Highreach, though that will mean nothing to you out here, and I would not have troubled your valley for a smaller thing than the one I've come for." He stopped, a careful distance off, and looked at her across the split wood and the dying light, and said the thing that came apart in her, like ice going off a river in the thaw. "I came to tell you that Stagmere was wrong. That the thing they cast you out for, 12 years ago, the thing they burned your wrist for and drove you into these wilds to die for, you didn't do. I know who did. I can prove it, and I have come to say, before the whole world if you'll let me, that they were wrong, and you were innocent, and I am sorry it took 12 years for anyone to come and tell you so." And Aveline stood in her own clearing, with the axe going slowly slack in her hands, and 12 years of hard-built stillness cracking straight down the middle, and did not know whether to weep or drive him off her ground, and did the thing she always did when a thing was too large, which was to go very quiet and very careful and look for the trap in it, because she had learned, the hard way, that the world does not ride into your valley in the last light and hand you back the thing it stole, and that a woman who lets herself believe it will has not yet learned what the world costs. Her name was Aveline, and she was 28 years old, and she had lived 12 of those years alone in the border wilds under the brand of a crime she had not committed. And to understand the riders in her valley, you have to understand the night that made her, which was the worst night of a life that had, until then, been ordinary and even happy. She had been born to the Stagmere pack, in the wooded hill country to the east, the daughter of a middling family, not high and not low, and for 16 years she had been simply Aveline, a quick, watchful, well-liked girl, close to her wolf, well on her way to the ordinary good life a Stagmere girl could expect. She had a mother she loved, and a younger brother she doted on, and a place in the pack that fit her the way a well-worn coat fits, and she had never once, in those 16 years, imagined that a life could be taken from a person whole, in a single night, for a thing they had not done. She learned it all at once, the way you learn the worst things. Stagmere had an alpha in those days, an old, hard, proud wolf named, no, the alpha's name does not matter, and Aveline had spent 12 years unlearning it. What matters is that the alpha had an heir, a son, a young man named Merrick, close to Aveline's own age, and that Merrick was found dead one autumn morning at the foot of the old quarry cliff at the pack's edge, his neck broken, and that the pack, wild with grief and needing, the way grieving packs do, someone to blame, found their someone with terrible speed. For Merrick had been seen, the evening before, arguing with Aveline. This was true. He had been pressing his attentions on her, the alpha's heir used to being given whatever he reached for, and she had refused him, sharply, in front of others, and there had been hard words, and she had walked away angry, and the next morning he was dead at the foot of the cliff, and there was a girl who had quarreled with him in front of witnesses the night before, and a pack that could not bear for its heir's death to be a meaningless accident, and the arithmetic of it was done almost before the body was cold. She had killed him. She had lured him to the cliff and pushed him, in revenge for the insult, or in a struggle, or in some dark way the story rearranged itself to need. It did not matter that there was no proof. It did not matter that Aveline, 16 and stunned, swore on everything she had that she had gone home after the quarrel and never seen him again. A pack that has decided a thing does not want proof. It wants the comfort of certainty, and certainty was cheaper than truth, and it was a girl of a middling family with no powerful kin to shield her, and the dead man was the alpha's only son. They did not kill her. That was not Stagmere's way with its own, and it was, Aveline came to understand in the wilds, a crueler thing than killing. They cast her out. They held the old rite of exile, the one the packs kept for the worst of crimes, and they burned the exile brand into the inside of her wrist, a small hard mark, the old sign of the cast-out, that any pack in the hill country would know on sight and shun. And they drove her out past the border stones into the wilds, alone, at 16, with the mark on her wrist and the whole of her life behind her, and nothing at all ahead. And they told her that if she ever crossed back over the border stones, she would be killed on sight, and they turned their backs, the whole pack, her own mother among them, because a mother who did not turn her back would be cast out too. And that was the last Aveline saw of the world she had been born to, the backs of everyone she had ever loved, turning away in the gray light, while she stood branded past the border stones, with nowhere in the world to go. She was supposed to die. That was what exile into the wilds meant. It was an execution that let the pack keep its hands clean, because a 16-year-old girl alone in the border wilds, branded so that no pack would take her in, does not last a season. Everyone knew it. Aveline knew it, standing past the border stones in the gray light. She was supposed to wander until the cold, or the hunger, or the wild wolves or the wild men took her, and to become a small sad story the pack told to frighten its children, and to trouble Stagmere's conscience no more than a fox does. She did not die, and the not dying was the whole of who she became. 12 years the wilds had her, and they made her into something the girl of 16 would not have recognized, and it is worth telling how, because it is the woman the riders found. She had lived, that first terrible year, on the thin edge of not living, had learned, half-starved and wholly alone, the hard skills the wilds demanded, or killed you for lacking, how to find water, and set a snare, and read the weather, and keep a fire, and above all, how to be alone, which was the hardest skill of all, and the one that cost her the most. She had wept the whole of that first year, in secret, to no one, and had come out the far side of the weeping, harder and quieter and more capable, and had found, somewhere in the second year, a valley. This valley, her valley, a hidden fold of the border wilds with water and wood and shelter and no pack's claim on it, and had made it hers, one hard season at a time, until she had a hut she had built with her own hands, and a garden she had cleared, and a life. Of a kind. A solitary, hard, self-sufficient life that owed nothing to anyone, and asked nothing of anyone, and could not be taken from her, because there was no one left to take it. She traded, warily, with the few trappers and wild men who crossed the border wilds, furs and herbs for the few things she could not make. And she kept her wolf close held, and never let it loose, because a woman alone does not risk the change with no pack to anchor her. And she kept, always, the brand on her wrist covered, not from shame. She had burned the shame out of herself years ago, along with the weeping, but because a covered wrist asked fewer questions. It is worth telling, in some detail, how the years had shaped her hands and her habits, and the small, hard laws she lived by, because it is in the habits that you see the woman, and the riders would find her wholly made of them. She rose before light, always, in every season, because the wilds punished the late rising and rewarded the woman who met the day before the day was ready for her. And she banked her fire at night with a care that was almost devotion, because a fire lost in the deep cold of the border wilds was a thing that could kill you. And she had learned in the first winter, when she nearly did lose it, that the small tending of small things was the whole difference between a woman who survived and a woman the spring thaw uncovered. She kept her stores counted. She knew, at any hour of any day, exactly how many measures of dried meat hung in her smoke shelter, and how many roots lay in her cold pit, and how many days of hard weather they would carry her. Because a woman alone, who did not count her stores, was a woman gambling with a winter that did not forgive gamblers. And Aveline had stopped gambling in the first year, when a careless autumn had nearly become a starved spring. She mended everything the moment it tore, sharpened everything the moment it dulled, because there was no one else to do it, and no market to replace it, and a snare cord left frayed was a rabbit not caught, was a meal not eaten, was, at the far cold end of a hard enough winter, a life. She had become, in 12 years, a woman for whom nothing was too small to matter, because she had lived long enough on the thin edge to know that it was always the small neglected thing that killed you in the end, never the great dramatic one. And she had learned the harder laws too, the ones that were not about hands and stores, but about the inside of a person alone. She had learned not to talk to herself, after the second year, when she caught herself doing it, and understood, with a cold clarity, that a woman who talked to herself in the wilds was a woman whose mind was beginning to wander off, looking for the company it could not have, and that down that road was the kind of madness that killed the solitary as surely as the cold. So she had made herself quiet, inside and out, had taught herself to sit with the silence and not need it filled, and it had cost her something to do it, some warmth, some ordinary human thing, but it had kept her sane, and she counted the cost worth paying. She had learned to mark the days, notching a post by her door, not from any hope that the count would matter to anyone, but because a woman who lost track of the days, lost track of the seasons, and a woman who lost track of the seasons died, and because the notches were, in their small way, a proof, 12 years of notches, a record that she had been here, that she had lived, that whatever else the world believed of her she had not, as it intended, simply vanished into the wilds and become nothing. She had learned to treat her own body kindly in the one way the wilds allowed, which was practically to rest it when it needed rest, even when the work called, because a woman who worked herself past her strength alone was a woman one bad fall from death, with no one to find her. To keep herself clean in the cold streams, even in the deep of winter, because sickness came to the filthy first. To tend her own small hurts with the herb craft she had taught herself out of necessity, because a cut gone bad in the wilds was a cut that could take an arm or a life, and there was no one to nurse her but herself. She was proud of all of it, and she had a right to be, and yet the shape of the pride was the shape of the wound beneath it, and Hesper would name that later, and Aveline would not be able to answer her. For every hard law she lived by came down, at bottom, to the same thing. Need no one, ask nothing, depend on nothing you cannot make or mend or carry yourself, and it had kept her alive, and it had also, slowly, over 12 years, walled off the whole half of a person that is made only in the company of others, so that she had become superbly, terribly complete. A woman who required nothing from anyone, and did not let herself feel what a thing it was to require nothing from anyone, because feeling it would have opened the one door she had bricked shut in the first year, the door with the turning backs behind it. She had made, in short, a life out of the ruins of one, and she was proud of it, in the hard, flinty way the wilds had taught her to be proud, and she told herself most days that it was enough. She wanted nothing from the world that had branded her. She hoped for nothing from it. She had put down, years ago, the one hope that had nearly killed her in the first year, the hope that someone would come, that the truth would out, that Stagmere would learn its error, and send for her, and give her back her life, because that hope had reopened, every single day of the first year, the wound of the backs turning away, and a person cannot bleed forever. So she had killed the hope, deliberately, the way she killed everything that threatened her survival, and she had lived 12 years in the clean, hard country past hope, wanting nothing, needing no one, the woman in the valley, and she had believed, right up until the evening 6 riders came down her drove track, that she had made her peace with never being given anything back. And then a man who called himself the Alpha King of Highreach stood in her clearing in the last light and told her that Stagmere had been wrong, that he could prove it, that he was sorry it had taken 12 years, and every carefully killed hope in her clawed its way back up out of the ground at once, and she hated it, and she could not make it stop. She did not let him stay the first night. That was the first thing that told Torrin what she was, though he did not say so until much later. She heard him out. She made herself hear him out, standing in her clearing with the axe in her hands while the light died, and the thing he told her was this, that he was the Alpha King of Highreach, the wolf kingdom that lay to the north of the whole hill country, overlord in the old loose way to the smaller packs of the region, Stagmere among them, and that some months past, a dying man in Stagmere had made a deathbed confession that had come, along the slow roads of pack news, at last to Highreach, and to the king's own ear. The man was named Aldous. No, the man's name was Garrow, and he had been, 12 years ago, a hunt second of Stagmere, and a hanger-on of the Alpha's dead son Merrick, and he had confessed, dying, the thing he could not carry to his grave, that it was he, Garrow, who had been at the quarry cliff that night, that he and Merrick had quarreled, over a debt, over a woman, over the small, ugly things young men die of, and that Garrow had struck Merrick in a rage, and Merrick had gone off the cliff, and that Garrow, terrified, had seen the whole pack's suspicion fall the next morning on a girl who had merely quarreled with the dead man, and had said nothing, had let it fall, had let a 16-year-old take his brand and his exile and his death sentence rather than confess, and had lived 12 years with it, and had died at last unable to hold it. And the confession had been witnessed and set down, and had reached the Alpha King of Highreach, who as overlord had the standing to reopen a pack's old judgment. And Torrin had read it, and had done a thing that Aveline could not understand and did not trust. He had not sent a messenger. He had come himself, 6 riders and a winter's ride, to the border wilds, to find the woman Stagmere had branded and cast out to die, and to tell her, to her own face, that the world had been wrong. "Why?" Aveline said when he had finished. It was the only word she had. Why would the Alpha King of Highreach ride a winter into the wilds to tell one cast-out woman she was innocent? "You could have sent a rider. You could have sent nothing at all. I'm no one. I'm a story Stagmere tells to frighten girls. There's nothing in it for a king to come himself. So why? What do you want?" "Because everyone who ever came into my life wanting nothing turned out to want everything, and I've learned to ask the question first." And Torin, Alpha King of Highreach, looked at the hard-branded woman in the ruined light, who trusted nothing, and had every reason not to, and did not give her a king's smooth answer, because he had already understood, in the little time he had watched her, that she was not a person you could safely give a smooth answer to. "Because I read the confession," he said plainly, "and I could not eat or sleep for it. Because I am an Alpha, and the one thing an Alpha is for, under all the ruling and the wars, the one old true thing, is that the pack does not cast out its own to die for a lie, and Stagmere did, on my overlordship, in my hill country, and no one stopped it, and a girl of 16 paid 12 years for another man's crime, while I sat in my hall to the north not knowing she existed. I could not send a rider to that. A rider is what you send when a thing is business. This was not business." He looked at her, and left the distance between them for her to keep. "As for what I want nothing from you, and I know you won't believe that, and I don't ask you to tonight. I've come to give a thing back, not to take one. Your name, your innocence, your place, if you want it, the exile can be lifted, the brand's judgment overturned, Stagmere made to answer for what it did. I can give you back the whole of the life they stole, as much of it as anyone can give back a stolen thing. That's what I want. To give it back. And you don't have to take it tonight, or trust it tonight, or let me past your fire tonight. I'll camp my men down the valley by the water, off your ground, and I'll be there in the morning, and the morning after, as long as it takes, until you believe I'm not another man come to take something from you." And he had gathered his reins, and taken his 6 riders down the valley to the water, off her ground, and left her alone in her own clearing, with the last of the light, and the whole of her killed hope clawing up out of the ground, and Aveline had stood there a long time in the dark, and had not slept that night at all. He did not take her east for a season, and this was the thing that began, slowly, to undo her, because it was the opposite of everything the world had taught her to expect. She had braced, that first night, for the trap, for the true price of his offer to show itself, for the king to reveal what he really wanted, for the giving back to turn out to be a taking in a kinder coat. It did not come. He camped down the valley by the water, off her ground, exactly as he had said, and in the morning, he did not come up and press her. He sent one man, unarmed, to ask whether she would take a share of the deer they'd taken, and when she refused it, he did not insist, and the deer was left, dressed and clean, on a stump at the edge of her ground where she could take it or leave it as she chose. And the next day, the same, some small offered thing, left at the edge, never pressed, never a hook in it that she could find. And the day after, he did not rush her. He did not court her, not then. He did not seem to want anything from her at all except to be, patiently, unthreateningly, there, a fixed point down the valley by the water, waiting, with the total patience of the old blood, until a woman who trusted nothing should begin, in her own time, to trust one small thing. She watched for the trap with the whole of her 12 years' wariness, and the watching itself became, slowly, a kind of proof, because the trap did not come and did not come and did not come. She catalogued his every act the way she catalogued weather, looking for the turn in it. The day he sent the dressed deer, she waited for the debt to be named, and it was not. The day one of his riders repaired, unasked, the broken hinge of her smoke shelter door, she waited for the repair to become a claim. See what we do for you, and it did not. The day Torin himself, passing her woodblock, saw her struggling with a knotted billet, the axe would not split clean, and did not step in to do it for her, but only, when she had beaten it at last, said mildly that it was well split. She waited for the condescension in it, and found none. Every act she braced against turned out to have no hook in it, and the strangeness of that, the sheer sustained strangeness of powerful people doing kind things and asking nothing back, worked on her more than any single kindness could have, because one kindness she could have dismissed as a ploy, and two, and three, but not a fortnight of them, not a steady unbroken fortnight of being treated, for the first time in 12 years, as a person whose ground and choices and dignity were simply to be respected, full stop, with no ledger kept. And there was a thing underneath even that, which she felt before she could name it, that he was not performing the patience. She had known men who were kind the way a hunter is quiet, as a technique, a stalking, the kindness a means and the woman the end of it, and she would have smelled that a valley off, 12 years of wary trading having given her a nose for the kindness that is really a hunt. This was not that. Torin was not being patient at her, working a slow siege. He was simply a patient man, who had decided a thing was hers to choose, and was therefore, with no strain and no calculation, waiting for her to choose it, and would have waited, she understood, a whole further winter without resentment, because the waiting was not a strategy he was employing, but a respect he actually held, and that, being respected in fact and not in show, by someone who would have gone on respecting her whether or not it ever won him anything, was the exact thing that no one had given the girl at the Borderstones, whose guilt had been decided without a hearing, and it reached the deepest and most bricked-over part of her, the part that had stopped believing, in the first year, that the world contained anyone who would treat her as a person when treating her as a thing was easier. It was the patience that got past her, in the end, where charm never could have. She had defenses against charm. 12 years of wary trappermen had built them. She had no defense at all against a powerful man who simply, day after day, asked nothing, and pressed nothing, and left the choosing wholly to her, because that was the one thing no one had ever done. Not the pack that cast her out deciding her guilt without proof, not the world that branded her without a hearing, not one single soul in 28 years who had decided what Aveline was for and never once asked her. And here was an alpha king who could have simply commanded her east as overlord, or swept her up in the name of justice, whether she willed it or not, choosing instead to sit down the valley by the water and wait, and leave the deciding to her. And it worked its way past all her defenses, precisely because it was not trying to. On the 9th evening she came down the valley to his fire. That was how it happened, in the end. Not him coming up to her, but her going down to him, on her own 2 feet, in her own time, which was, she understood later, exactly why he had waited, so that whatever happened between them would begin with her choosing to cross her own ground toward him, and not with him crossing it toward her. She came down to his fire in the 9th evening's dark, and sat across it from him the way she had once sat across 100 wary trades, and said, without preamble, because the wilds had burned the preamble out of her, "If I go east with you, if I let you overturn the thing they did to me, and stand in front of Stagmere, and take back a life I stopped wanting years ago, I'll have a condition, and you'll swear to it before I set 1 foot toward the Borderstones, because a woman who was judged once without her leave has earned the right to set the terms of everything after." "Name it," said Torin. "You'll never decide a thing about my life and tell me after," Aveline said. "Not the hearing, not the justice, not where I stand, or what I say, or what becomes of me when it's done. Everyone who ever had power over me used it to decide what I was without asking. The pack decided I was guilty, the brand decided I was cast out, 12 years of the world decided I was no one, and not one of them ever once asked Aveline what Aveline had to say. You're an alpha king, You could give me back my whole life and still be one more powerful person arranging me like a stone on a board, a wronged girl to be restored, a justice to be done, a thing that happens to me instead of a thing I choose. I won't have it. If I come east, I come as a person and not a cause, and every step of it, the hearing, the facing them, all of it, gets asked of me first and decided by me, or I'll stay in my valley and keep my hard, clean life that owes nothing to anyone, because I would rather have my own small, true life that no one can arrange than a great restored one where I'm still, after everything, a thing men do things to. Swear that. Swear you'll ask, every time, and decide nothing of me for me. And then I'll come. And Torin, Alpha King of Highreach, looked at the woman across his fire, who had been given nothing by the world in 12 years, and was now refusing to be given even her own justice, on any terms but her own. And something moved in his hard face that was not pity, and was not the satisfaction of a king dispensing mercy, but the astonished respect of one hard creature for another it had badly underestimated. And he inclined his head, once, slowly, the way the old blood acknowledges the old blood. I swear it, he said. Every choice that's yours, you'll make. From the border stones to the end of it, and past the end of it. I did not ride a winter to arrange you. I rode it to give you back the one thing they took that matters more than the years. The right to choose your own life. It would be a poor gift if I handed it to you already arranged. You have my word, and my word holds the whole North together. It'll hold for one woman who bargained with a king from the far side of a campfire, with nothing in her hands but the truth, which is more than Stagmere ever gave you. And that was the first bargain between them, struck across a fire in the border wilds, a king's oath and an exile's price, and Aveline sat in the dark on the ground that was hers, and felt, for the first time in 12 years, the smallest crack open in the hard, clean wall she had built past hope, and did not yet know that the man across the fire had ridden a winter not only for justice, and that the thing beginning between them across the low flames would cost her, before it was done, the one defense the wilds had never managed to take, her certainty that she needed no one at all. They did not ride east at once. That was the second thing that told her Torin was not the man the world had trained her to expect, because the sensible thing, the king's thing, would have been to gather her up and ride hard for Stagmere, and get the justice done, and instead he asked her, plainly, how she wanted to do it, and when she said she was not ready, that 12 years in the wilds did not undo in a night, that she needed time before she could ride back toward the border stones she had been told she would die at. He simply nodded, and stayed, and the 6 riders made a longer camp down the valley by the water, and the days became a slow thing, and the slow thing became the whole of how they came to know each other. He did not court her. She would have bolted from courting. She had defenses a mile deep against a man who wanted her. What he did instead was help. He was, she discovered, entirely unable to sit idle in her valley while she worked, and so, asking first. Always asking first. May I? Would you rather I didn't? He took up the endless labor of the place beside her, and it was in the labor that the wall came down, stone by stone, so slowly she did not feel it fall. He split wood with her, and she learned that the Alpha King of Highreach, who could have sat and watched his men do it, swung an axe like a man who had done it his whole life, because, he told her, a king who forgets how to do the plain work of living, forgets what he rules over. He mended the sagging corner of her roof that she had not been able to reach alone in 12 years, and did not make a thing of it, and did not say there, now you'll let me do more, but only fixed the one thing she pointed to, and no more, because she had said the one thing, and not the others. He learned the valley the way she had learned it, its water and its weather, and its small hard economies, and he was interested, really interested, in a way no one had been interested in anything of Aveline's in 12 years, in how she had done it, how a branded girl of 16 had made a living where the wilds killed grown men, and he asked her about it, and listened to the whole long answer, and she found herself, On the fourth evening and the fifth and the sixth, talking, really talking, telling this hard, quiet king the story of her 12 years the way she had never told anyone, because there had been no one to tell, and because he listened the way the valley listened, wholly, without flinching from the hard parts, without pity, which she could not have borne, but with something steadier than pity, a kind of grave attention that made the 12 years feel, for the first time, not like a shame she had survived, but like a thing she had done, a hard, great thing, a building and not only an enduring. She learned him too, in the small ways. She learned that the Alpha King of Highreach, feared overlord of the whole northern hill country, was privately quiet and dry, and carried the weight of his ruling more heavily than he let anyone see. That he had come to his crown, young and hard, after a bad succession, she pieced together only slowly, and had made himself into the kind of king the North needed, just and unbending, and alone. That the thing that had truly driven him a winter into the wilds was not only justice in the abstract, but a specific old wound of his own. That he had failed, once, years back, to stop an injustice he could have stopped, had trusted the wrong judgment and let a wrong stand, and had sworn after it that he would never again let his own comfort keep him from righting to a wrong he could right. And that Aveline's case, when the dead man's confession reached him, had struck exactly that old wound, so that he could not, would not, send a rider, because sending a rider was what he had done the last time, and it had cost a life. She learned, in short, that the king who had come to give her back her life had come partly to redeem his own, and instead of making his coming smaller in her eyes, it made it truer, because a man who rides to right your wrong for a reason of his own is a man who will not tire of it when it becomes hard, and everything about Torrin told her he did not tire of things. The days went on, and the slow thing between them grew in the way slow things grow, unremarked, in the doing of ordinary work, so that neither of them could later have said which evening it had begun, only that at some point the valley had stopped being a woman's solitary holding that a king was patiently camped beside, and had become, without anyone deciding it, a thing the two of them tended together. He learned her water, where the spring rose clean and where the runoff fouled it after rain, and how she carried it, and on the 5th day he took the carrying from her, without being asked, not to spare her, she understood, but because he had watched her do it 100 times and it had become his to do too, the way work becomes shared not by agreement, but by long standing near each other. She learned the way he thought, which was slow and thorough, and came out, when it came out, in few words carefully weighed, so that she came to trust a thing he said the way she trusted whether she had read herself, because he did not say things he had not first turned all the way over. They fell into the rhythm of two capable people working the same ground, a rhythm she had never had with anyone, having always, in the wilds, worked alone, and having had, before the wilds, only the ordinary busy company of a pack. Never this, the particular quiet of two people who are good at the same hard work doing it side by side, handing tools without asking, knowing without looking where the other one was. There was an evening she remembered after, of all the evenings, because it was the one where she caught herself. They had spent the day at the hard work of laying in the last of the winter wood, her 12 years' habit, to over-provide against the cold, which he had not questioned but simply joined, and they had worked until the light went, splitting and stacking, and had not spoken much, because the work did not need it, and at the end of it they had stood together looking at the full wood store in the blue dusk, a winter's fuel laid by, and she had felt a thing she had not felt in 12 years, which was the particular satisfaction of a hard day's work seen and shared, the wordless and, there it is, of two people who have made a thing together and are both looking at it. And she had caught herself feeling it, and the catching had frightened her, because she understood in that instant that she had begun to want the evenings, to look forward across the day's work to the standing together in the dusk, and that wanting anything was the thing she had spent 12 years teaching herself not to do, and that she had let it happen anyway, quietly, in the wood splitting, where her defenses were not looking. She learned the small domestic truths of him that no one else in the North knew, because no one else in the North had ever seen the Alpha King of Highreach live for a fortnight in a border hut. She learned that he ate plainly and without complaint whatever she set down, and thanked her for it, every time, in a way that was not courtesy but seemed to come from some old place in him that knew what a shared meal was worth. She learned that he could not abide a job left half done, and would stay at a thing past sense to finish it clean, and that this was the same quality, she came slowly to see, that had ridden him a winter into the wilds, and would not let him send a rider, a man made all of one piece, who did not do things part way, in wood-splitting or in justice or, she would learn, in loving. She learned that he was easier in her small valley than he was, by his own quiet admission, in his own great hall, because in the valley there was only the work and the weather, and the one hard woman who wanted nothing from him, and no court, no petitioners, no weight of a North watching to see the king be a king. "I have not," he told her once, splitting wood in the gray, not looking at her. In the offhand way he said the truest things. "Been this long a plain man since before the crown. I had forgot I could be. It is a strange gift, to be given by the one person I came here to give a gift to." And she learned, most dangerously, that she was easy with him too. That the quiet she had built in 12 years alone, the not talking she had taught herself so as not to go mad, had somehow opened, with him, into a different quiet. A shared one. A silence that was not the absence of company, but a kind of company itself. So that she could work a whole afternoon beside him, and say nothing, and feel, not the old solitary self-sufficiency, but something she had no word for, because she had not felt it in 12 years, and had half forgotten it existed. The ease of being with someone before whom you did not have to be anything at all. That was the thing that undid her, in the end, more than any grand gesture could have. Not that the king was kind, or patient, or just, though he was all of those, but that being near him was easy, in the bone, in a way nothing had been easy for her in 12 years, and that a woman who has been alone long enough will guard against every hard thing and be brought down, at the last, entirely by an easy one. There was one evening that went further than the others, and it was the evening of the notched post, and she had not meant to show it to anyone in the world. It stood by her door, the post, weathered gray, and down the whole length of it ran the notches, 12 years of them, a mark for every turning of the moon, cut with the same knife in the same careful hand, close-ranked and countless, the private ledger of a woman keeping track of the days so as not to be lost in them. Torrin had noticed it early, she knew, because he noticed everything, but he had not asked, in his way, had left it, like everything, for her to offer or not. And on the 11th evening, for a reason she could not afterward name, some loosening in her from the days of easy work, she found herself standing by the post in the last light with him near, and she put her hand flat against the notches, and she told him what they were. 12 years, she said, one for every moon. I started it the first winter, when I understood I could lose the count, that if I let the days run together I'd lose the seasons, and losing the seasons kills you out here, but that wasn't the whole of why I kept it. She was quiet a moment, feeling the old gray wood under her palm. I kept it because I needed a proof, that I was here, that the days were happening to someone. When you're cast out, when the whole world you had turns its back and walks away, and you're meant to just stop, just vanish into the wilds and become a story they tell, there's a thing that happens to you, in the alone, where you start to doubt you're real, where you go so long unseen by any human eye that you half believe you've faded out, that maybe the pack was right and you did die at the border stones, and this is only some gray after thing. The notches were against that. Every moon I cut one, and it meant, still here, still real, still, whatever they said, alive. 12 years of still here, cut into a post by a door no one was ever going to knock on. She took her hand off the wood and looked at it, at the count, and said the thing under the thing, low. You're the first person who's stood by this post and been shown what it is. 12 years I cut them for no eyes but mine. I'm not sure I know why I'm showing you. Except that a proof you keep for no one starts to feel like no proof at all, after long enough, and I think some part of me has been wanting, without letting myself know I wanted it, for one single soul, to see the count and know that all these years, out here, in the alone, there was still someone here keeping it. And Torin looked at the 12 years of notches, the countless close-cut marks of a woman insisting to no one that she was still alive, and he did not say the easy things, did not say how terrible or how brave, because he had learned by now that she had no use for either. He stood and looked at the ledger of her survival for a long grave while, and then he said quietly, "Then let me be the one who saw it, not to take it over. It's yours. The count's yours. You kept yourself alive and real. Through 12 years no one should have to survive, and no one gets to share the keeping of that now. But you asked, once, why a king would ride a winter for a woman he'd never met. Here's a truer answer than the one I gave you at your fire. Because a person can be cast out so thoroughly that they have to notch a post to prove to themselves they exist, and that is a wrong so deep that no rider, no message, no restored name sent by proxy could ever answer it. The only thing that answers being made to feel unreal is another person standing in front of you, seeing you, the whole of you, and knowing you are real. That's what a rider couldn't carry. That's why I came myself." And Aveline stood by her post in the last light and felt the thing in her chest that she had no wall left against, and did not split any wood to keep from noticing it, and that was, though neither of them named it, the evening the wall truly came down, days before the fever finished the work. The blunt one was among his 6, and her name was Hesper, and she was the only woman Torin had brought. An ancient iron-spined tracker who had served the High-Reach crown since before Torin was born and had appointed herself, from the first day in the valley, Aveline's rough and uninvited guardian. She had no softness in her, and no patience for it, and she had watched Aveline with sharp old eyes for a week before she said her piece, and she said it, when she said it, in the flat, blunt way of the very old. She found Aveline at the woodblock one gray evening, splitting more than the fire needed, which Hesper read in a glance. "You're doing the thing," Hesper said, settling herself on a stump with a grunt. "Where you split wood you don't need, because if your hands are busy, you don't have to notice what your chest is doing. I've watched you do it 3 evenings running. Every time he laughs at something you said, and he laughs, girl, which that man has not done in the 10 years I've known him, not once, not till your valley. Every time, you go and split more wood." She fixed Aveline with a shrewd eye. "You've decided a thing you want, is a thing you're not allowed. 12 years the world taught you that wanting gets a woman branded, that needing gets you cast out, that the safe thing is to want nothing and need no one, and split your own wood alone till you die. Kept you alive, that did. I'll not say it didn't." She leaned forward. "But you're not 16 at the Borderstones anymore, and you've gone and started wanting the biggest thing of all, a person. And you're doing it about that too. Deciding before he's said a word that a cast-out woman doesn't get to want a king, that it's one more thing that'll be taken the moment you let yourself have it." Hesper snorted. "Aveline, look at me. That man rode a winter into the wilds for you. He asks your leave before he mends a roof. He has not commanded you one single thing in a week. Him that commands a kingdom, because he'd rather wait for you to choose than take a thing you didn't give. A king who wanted only justice would have done the justice and gone home a fortnight past. This one's not doing justice anymore. He's courting you and calling it justice because he's as afraid of the wanting as you are. You both think you're the one not allowed. The wanting's not the danger, girl. It never was. The danger was Stagmere, and Stagmere's 100 leagues east, and the man down the valley by the water is not them. You can want a thing now, out loud, and have it, and no one's going to brand you for it. No one. Not anymore." And she rose, joints cracking, and went back to the camp, and left Aveline at the woodblock with the axe, idle in her hands, and her chest doing exactly the thing she split wood not to notice, and the slow thing between her and the king, suddenly, terribly, named. Aveline did not sleep that night either. She lay in her hut in the dark and turned the old tracker's words over the way she turned everything over, looking for where they were wrong, and could not find it, and that was the trouble. For she had built the whole of her survival on a single hard belief, laid down in the bleeding first year and never once questioned since, that wanting was the thing that had destroyed her, that the girl of 16 had wanted a life, and a place, and a good ordinary future, and the wanting had made her soft, and the softness had left her undefended when the pack turned on her, and that the lesson of the border stones, the one true lesson she had paid 12 years to learn, was that a woman who wants nothing cannot have anything taken from her. It was a clean belief, and it had kept her alive, and Hesper had just walked up to her woodblock and put an old blunt thumb on the flaw in it that Aveline had spent 12 years not looking at. That a woman who wants nothing has also, by the same stroke, nothing, that the wall which keeps out the taking keeps out the having too, that she had not in fact made herself safe, she had only made herself empty, and had called the emptiness safety because the emptiness did not hurt the way the wanting had. And now there was a man down the valley by the water, who had walked into the empty life she had called safe, and made her want again, against her whole will, against 12 years of hard training, want the evenings, want the shared work, want the ease of him, want, God help her, to be known by someone before she died, to have one single soul in the world who knew the whole of what she had survived and did not turn a back on it, and the wanting terrified her exactly as much as Hesper had said, because the last time she had let herself want a life, the world had branded her wrist and driven her out to die for it. She lay in the dark and felt the old terror and the new wanting pull against each other in her chest, and understood that she was more afraid, lying safe in her own hut with a king camped kindly down her valley, than she had been in years of real danger in the wilds, because danger she knew how to survive, alone, with her hands. But this, the wanting, was the one thing 12 years had not taught her how to survive, and she did not know, lying there, whether she was brave enough to try. The test came before the confession did, as it so often does, because the world does not wait for two guarded people to find their courage. It came from the east, and it wore the shape of the very thing Torrin had come to write. For word of the Alpha King's winter ride into the wilds did not stay secret, such things never do, and it reached Stagmere, and Stagmere did not receive it the way a pack ashamed of an old wrong ought to. It should have. A just pack, hearing that the girl it had branded was proven innocent, would have grieved and made amends. But Stagmere had a new alpha now, 12 years on, a hard, ambitious wolf named Roel. No, his name was Corwin, who had risen to the seat in the years since, and who understood, the moment the news came, exactly what Aveline's proven innocence meant, that his whole pack's judgment, the judgment its authority rested on, had been a lie, that a woman it had cast out to die was owed a reckoning it could not pay. And, worst of all, that Merrick, the old Alpha's dead son whose killing had been the pack's great grief, and Corwin's own path to the succession, had died not as the pack's story held but sordidly, at a hanger-on's hands, over a debt, and that the whole edifice of Stagmere's 12-year certainty was about to come down. Corwin did what such men do when the truth threatens them. He decided the truth must not be allowed to arrive. He came west with a war band, into the border wilds, to the edge of Aveline's valley, and he came under no flag of parley. He came to end the thing before the Alpha King could carry it east, to see the branded woman dead in the wilds where she had always been meant to die. An accident, a wild country misfortune, a story that could be told any way once there was no living woman to contradict it. And Aveline, standing in her own clearing, watching a war band of her old pack come down her drove track, felt the whole of the old terror rise up, the border stones, the turning backs, the certainty of 12 years ago that Stagmere had decided her death and would have it. Except that this time, she was not a stunned girl of 16. This time she was 28, and 12 years hard, and she stood on ground that was hers, and there was a king by the water who had sworn to decide nothing of her life for her, and she found, facing the thing that had haunted her for 12 years, that she was not going to run, and she was not going to be handed her safety either. That was the thing she made clear, in the short, hard hour before Corwin's band reached the clearing, and it was the thing that told Torin, past all doubt, what she was. For Torin's instinct, and his 6 riders and Hespers, was to put Aveline behind them, to make it the king's fight, to shield the wronged woman from the pack that had wronged her. And Aveline refused it. "If you stand in front of me," she told Torin, low and fast, "and drive them off, and carry me east to a hearing where you speak for me, and the king's justice restores me, then I am, forever, exactly what Stagmere made me, a thing that happens, a girl who was cast out and a woman who was rescued, and never once, in the whole of it, a person who stood on her own ground and spoke for herself. I have been silent for 12 years because they took my voice at the border stones, and I will not take it back only to have you use it for me, however kindly. Corwin has come to keep me from speaking. So let me speak, stand with me if you'll stand. I'd be a fool to refuse 6 swords and a king. But stand with me, beside me, not in front of me, and when Corwin comes let me be the one who faces him, because the whole wrong of 12 years ago was that no one let me speak, and the only thing that mends it is not a king's justice done to me, but my own voice, at last, out loud, in front of the pack that silenced it." And Torin, who had sworn to ask and not decide, looked at her a long, hard moment, every instinct in him straining to protect her, and did the harder thing, which was to honor the oath and let her stand. And he stepped to her side and not in front of her, 6 swords ranged beside a branded woman, and not around her, and they faced the war band of Stagmere together, and it was Aveline who stepped forward to speak. "You've come to kill me quietly," Aveline said, into the dangerous silence, and her voice, 12 years little used, carried across the clearing hard and clear, before the king can carry the truth east. "Because the truth is that you branded a girl of 16 for a crime a dying man has confessed was his, and that your whole pack's judgment was a lie, and that Merrick died in a squalid quarrel, and not by my hand, and that every one of you who turned your back at the border stones turned it on an innocent girl, and knew, in the private dark, that you had no proof, you only had a grief that wanted a body to blame, and a girl with no kin to shield her." She looked at Corwin, and 12 years of surviving what he had meant to be her death made her impossible, now, to stare down. "You cannot kill me quiet enough to make that untrue, Corwin." The dying man already spoke. The king already knows. "Kill me in my valley, and you don't bury the truth. You only add my second murder to my first exile, and the Alpha King of Highreach standing at my side will carry both east instead of one. There is no version of this where the lie holds. It broke the night Garrow confessed. All that's left to decide is whether Stagmere is a pack that hears a hard truth and answers for it, or a pack that murders a woman twice to keep from being ashamed. And that, unlike my guilt, is a thing you actually get to choose. So choose. But choose knowing that I am not 16, and I am not silent, and I am not alone, and I am not, this time, going to die quietly in the wilds to make your story easier to tell." She was not finished, and she did not raise her voice, because the 12 years had taught her that the hardest truths are the ones said quietly. "You thought you were riding west to kill a woman," she said. "You were not. You were riding west to kill a fact, and a fact does not die when the woman does. It only loses the one voice that can speak it kindly, and keeps the ones that speak it as an accusation. I am the mercy in this, Corwin, though you rode a war band to end me. Alive, I can stand in your hall and let it be a hard truth spoken and answered and set down. Dead, I am a murdered innocent, and an Alpha King's grievance and the end of your seat, and Stagmere's shame becomes a wound the whole North picks at for a generation. You did not come here to save your pack. You came here to save your comfort, and you would have spent your pack to buy it. Put up your sword. It is the only thing left you can do that a pack could ever forgive." And the clearing was silent, and Corwin's hard face did something complicated, and behind him, in his own warband, Aveline saw the thing she had not dared hope for. The wavering, the shift, the men of Stagmere who had ridden west, half believing their alpha, and now, hearing the branded woman speak the truth plainly, with an alpha king at her side, beginning to understand that they had ridden out to commit a murder to bury a wrong, and that they wanted no part of it. And Torin, beside her, not in front of her, looked at her with an expression that was not a king's at all, that was naked and astonished and something close to worship, the look of a man watching the person he loves refuse, on her own ground, to be silenced by the thing that had silenced her for 12 years. Corwin did not get his quiet killing. His own band would not give it to him. Enough of them broke, in the end, refusing to raise a hand against a woman whose innocence they had heard proven in her own voice, that the thing collapsed without a blow struck, and Corwin was left in the clearing with a war band that would not war, understanding at last that some truths cannot be buried by killing the one who speaks them, that the lie had died the night Garrow confessed, and all his violence could not resurrect it. He turned east again, unmade, and the reckoning with Stagmere after that is not the heart of this tale, and can be told briefly. The exile was overturned, the Brand's judgment struck from the pack's law. Corwin answered to the Alpha King's justice for the murder he had ridden west to commit, and Stagmere was made, at last, 12 years late, to say the word it owed, that it had been wrong, that Aveline had been innocent, that a pack had cast out its own to die for a lie. There was, in the hall of Stagmere, one moment that Aveline had not braced for, and could not have, because she had spent 12 years teaching herself not to hope for it. Her mother was there. Older, grayer, bowed by the years, the woman whose back had turned away at the border stones, because a mother who did not turn her back would be cast out too. She was there in the hall when her daughter's innocence was spoken aloud, and when it was done, she came to Aveline across the same hall, through the same pack, and stood in front of her, and could not speak. And Aveline looked at the mother who had turned away, and felt the whole tangle of 12 years rise up in her, the child's grief that her own mother had not defied the pack for her, and the grown woman's understanding, hard won in the wilds, that a mother who defied them would only have been cast out to die beside her, that the turned back had perhaps been not abandonment, but the one poor protection a powerless woman could offer, staying alive within the pack, so that somewhere in the world one heart still carried the daughter's name. Aveline did not know, even then, which it had been. But she found she did not need to know, that she had come too far past the border stones to be ruled any longer by that grey morning, and she took her mother's hands, the two of them weeping now without any words at all, and let the old wound be, at last not healed. 12 years do not heal, but laid down, set down, no longer carried. It was the one thing in the hall she had not thought to want, and it was, in its way, harder and larger than the justice. Because justice is owed and can be demanded, but this was only given, freely, too late and not too late at once, mother to daughter across the hall that had cast the daughter out. It did not give her back the 12 years. Nothing could. But it gave her back her name, and her innocence, spoken aloud where the whole pack could hear, and it gave her back, unlooked for, the hands of her mother, and those were the things she had stopped letting herself want. And having them was stranger and harder, and more than she had imagined, and she wept, once, when it was done, for the girl of 16 who had needed it, and not had it, and then she was done weeping, and she was free. But that is the justice, and the pack, and it is not the heart of this tale. The heart of it was the night before Corwin came, and what the fear of that coming broke loose between her and the king, because it was in the hard hour of facing her old death that Aveline understood, all at once, that she did not want to face it without him, and that the not wanting to was the exact thing 12 years in the wilds had been built to make impossible. There was the crossing of the border stones, first, and that must be told, because it was the thing she had been told 12 years before would kill her, and she went back to it on her own 2 feet, with a king at her side, and would not let anyone make it smaller than it was. They came to the border stones of Stagmere on a grey noon, the low grey markers past which a girl of 16 had been driven, and told that if she ever recrossed them, she would be killed on sight. And Aveline drew her horse up before them, and sat and looked at the stones a long time, and no one hurried her, because Torrin had put out a hand and stilled his riders without a word, understanding, in his way, that this was not a place to be ridden through, but a place to be met. She looked at the grey stones and felt the whole of the worst day of her life rise up out of them. The brand fresh and screaming on her wrist, the backs of everyone she had loved turning away in the grey light, her own mother's back among them, the certainty that she was being sent past these stones to die, and that no one who had ever known her would grieve it. 12 years she had lived, not 3 days' ride from these stones, and never once come near them, because they marked the edge of the world that had cast her out, and the law of that world was that she died if she crossed back. And here she was, at the stones, alive, 28, and hard and innocent, and proven so, with an alpha king beside her, whose overlordship made the old death law so much air. "They told me I'd die if I ever came back past these," she said, to Torrin, to the stones, to the grey day. That was the last thing Stagmere said to me. Not goodbye, not we're sorry, cross back and we kill you. 12 years, that's been the edge of the world for me. Everything east of these stones was the country that wanted me dead, and I built my whole life west of them, so as never to test whether they meant it. She looked at the stones, and something in her hardened and steadied both. And now I'm going to ride back across them. Not sneaking, not at night, not hoping no one sees. In the grey noon with a king and 6 riders, back into the country that branded me, to stand in their hall and make them say they were wrong. The girl they drove out past these stones was supposed to be a story by now, a thing they'd frightened their children with and half forgotten. Instead, she's about to ride back through her own death sentence like it was a garden gate. And she touched her horse forward and crossed the border stones of Stagmere going east, alive, 12 years after she had crossed them going west and left for dead. And Torrin crossed them at her side, not before her, and the old death law broke under her horse's feet like river ice in the thaw, and she did not weep, though she had thought she might. She rode through straight-backed and dry-eyed and harder than the stones, because some homecomings are not for weeping but for proving, and this one she meant to prove all the way to the hall. It broke the night the fever took her, and it was Torrin who held her through it, and it was that night that unmade the last of her wall. For the standing in the cold clearing facing Corwin's band, and the days of hard travel east to the hearing that followed, and the whole long strain of a thing she had spent 12 years surviving alone, now happening all at once, it took its toll on a body that had lived hard for 12 years, and some nights into the eastward journey, Aveline fell ill, a hard sudden wilderness fever of the kind that had killed better-fed people than her, and for 3 days on the road she burned. And here the old story of her wolf came due, because the fever woke it, the wolf she had held close and never loosed in 12 years alone, because a woman alone dares not shift with no pack to anchor her. The wolf woke in the fever's heat and rose, disoriented and starving after 12 years caged, and it was going to take her, the untethered wolf and the fever together dragging her down, and she had no anchor, had never had an anchor, had made a whole life out of needing no anchor. And it was Torrin who became one. It is worth saying plainly what the loosing of that wolf meant, because it was the deepest danger of the whole tale, and the thing that finally undid her defenses, and it was not a small thing. A wolf held caged 12 years does not wake gentle. Aveline had not shifted since before the border stones, had held the change down through 12 years of solitude with an iron will, because the change is a losing of the self into the wolf, and a woman alone with no pack-bond to call her back out of it risks running as the wolf and never returning as the woman, going feral in the wilds, lost past finding. So she had never dared. In 12 years, she had kept the wolf chained in the dark of her, felt it pace and starve and rage there, and never once let it out, because letting it out alone, might have been the end of Aveline for good. And now the fever, which burns down the will as it burns up the body, had struck the chains off all at once, and the wolf came up out of 12 years of caged, dark, maddened, and starving and wild, with no pack bond anywhere to anchor it, dragging her down into the change with nothing at the bottom to bring her back. And that was the death in the fever, worse than the fever itself. Not that she would die of the sickness, but that she would be lost in the wolf, that the woman who had survived 12 years would dissolve at last into a feral thing running the wilds, undone not by the world's cruelty, but by her own long-caged self coming loose with no one to hold the line. He did the thing an alpha does, and she had never in 12 years had done for her. He anchored her. Through the worst of the 3 nights, when the fever and the loosed wolf together were pulling her under, he stayed, and held her, old blood to old blood, gave her wolf an older, steadier wolf to run alongside instead of drowning, and he did not let go through the whole of it, though holding a fever-wild old blood wolf through the change is no small danger. He did not let go. And Aveline, going under, reached in her delirium for the anchor of him, the way a drowning swimmer reaches for the one solid thing, and clung, and did not drown, because he was there. And she came back to herself on the 4th gray morning, weak and drenched and alive, wrapped in the arms of the Alpha King of Highreach. Her long-caged wolf settled for the first time in 12 years, because it had, at last, another wolf to anchor to, and she lay there in the gray light and understood, with something like terror, that she had needed him. In the night, absolutely. That the whole proud 12-year architecture of needing no one had come down in a fever, and that she was not, as she had told herself for 12 years, a woman who could stand entirely alone, that no one was, that the standing alone had never been strength but only a wound she had learned to call strength, and that being held through the dark by someone who would not let go was not the weakness the wilds had taught her it was, but the thing she had been starving for, past hope, for 12 years. And neither of them let go. That was the thing. The fever had broken. The danger was past. There was no anchoring need, any more, for the king to hold her. And neither of them let go. And it was Aveline, in the end, weak and raw and without a wall at last, who looked up at the hard, astonishing face of the man who had held her wolf through 3 nights and not let go, and said, in a voice wrecked and honest, "You held on. 3 nights. You could have been hurt, holding a loosed wolf that hadn't shifted in 12 years, and you knew it, and you held on anyway. Why?" And Torin, Alpha King of Highreach, who had never in his hard life said a soft thing aloud, did not fail to say it now. "Because there is no version of my life," he said, low, certain, "where I hold you through a fever and let go at the safe moment. I told myself for a winter it was justice, a wrong to right, an old debt of my own to pay. It was justice at the start. It stopped being only justice the first evening you came down your valley to my fire and bargained with me like the hardest lord in the north, a branded woman with nothing in her hands but the truth, and would not be handed even your own freedom. It was never only the wrong I came to right, Aveline. It was you, the person, not the cause. I'd have loved the woman who split her own wood for 12 years, and would not scurry off her ground for 6 armed men, whether there'd been a wrong to right or not. The confession only told me where to find you. What I found was not a case. It was the one person I've met in 10 years of ruling, who looked at an Alpha King, and did not want a single thing from him but the truth. And there was nothing walled left in either of them, no king and no exile, only 2 hard people who had each built a life out of needing no one, and had found, in each other, the one person worth needing. And when he kissed her, it was not gentle, exactly, and not fierce, exactly, it was certain. The way the ground she'd won was certain. The way an anchor is certain. And she kissed him back with the wolf that had, at last, stopped being alone, and the brand on her wrist lay bare between them, and meant, for the first time in 12 years, nothing at all, because the woman who wore it was no longer anyone's to cast out or to rescue, but only, Finally, her own, and his, by choosing. Hesper found them in the gray after-fever dawn and looked at the pair of them a long moment and said only, in her flat, blunt way, "Well, took a fever and a warband, but you got there. About time. Now the both of you sleep, before the queen-to-be of Highreach falls off her horse and makes a liar of everyone who said she was tough." And she paused, at the edge of the firelight, and looked back at the two of them a moment, with something in her old face that was almost gentle, which on Hesper was as rare as snow in high summer. "For what it's worth, girl," she said, gruff, not quite meeting Aveline's eyes, "I've watched a great many people be given back a thing the world stole from them, in my years, and most of them spend the rest of their days small and bitter, guarding the giving back like a miser, afraid of it being taken twice. You won't. I've watched you a fortnight. You're going to spend it. You're going to take the whole of this hard great life you've been handed and pour it out on that pack of his, and this north of yours, till there's not a drop left unused, because you know, the way only the cast-out ever really know, exactly what it's worth. That's the thing they should have branded on you at the Borderstones, if they'd had the wit, not cast out, won't waste a thing." And she stumped off to see to the camp, and left them the dawn. It was 3 winters after the riders came down her valley that Aveline stood at the edge of a high meadow in the Highreach country in the long gold evening light, and watched the young wolves of the pack at their running, and thought about the woman who had split the last of the winter wood alone in a border valley, and taught herself to want nothing at all. She was not that woman anymore, and she was, still, entirely that woman. That was the thing she had come to understand. The justice, and the crown, and the love had not replaced Aveline with someone softer. They had only, at last, let Aveline be the whole of herself, the hard self-sufficient exile, and the woman who could now let herself be held both, the one who had survived 12 years alone, and the one who had learned, at 28, the harder thing, which was not to. And she had found that the 12 wild years had not been wasted, that a person who has been cast out and survived it holds a place differently than one who was always safe within the pack, more warily and more kindly both, with a memory in the bone of what it is to be the one turned away at the Borderstones. She used her place gently. She had made Highreach, quietly, a pack where no one was ever again cast out on a grief that wanted a body to blame, had seen the old right of exile by brand struck from the northern law entirely, so that no girl of 16 would ever again be branded on a pack's certainty and driven into the wilds to die. And the whole north had bent, slowly, around the queen who had come out of the wilds, not because she had been wronged, but because she, more than anyone, knew exactly what a wrong judgment cost, and would not have it happen under her hand. Torrin came and stood beside her, the way he did, and they watched the young wolves run, and after a while he said, quietly, the question he had never quite asked, the one he always left in her hands. "Do you ever wish the confession had never reached me? That Garrow had carried it to his grave, and I'd never ridden west, and you'd kept your hard, clean valley that owed nothing to anyone. You'd have never had to face Corwin, never had to burn through a fever with your whole caged wolf waking, never had the weight of a crown and a north to tend. It was a simpler life, out there. Sometimes I think I rode into a woman's hard-won peace and traded it for a great heavy one, whether she'd have chosen it or not." And Aveline, who had made him swear to ask and not decide, and had learned in the years since to hold herself to the same law, told him the truth, in her own words, out loud, the way she had earned the right to. "You didn't trade my peace for a heavier one," she said. "My valley wasn't peace. It was a truce. A truce I made with a world that had branded me, where the terms were that I'd want nothing and need no one, and it would leave me alone. And it kept me alive, and it kept me safe, and it kept me half a person, because a person who has taught herself to need no one has cut off the half of living that's other people, and called the wound strength, the way I called my whole hard valley strength." She turned to him, to the king who had ridden a winter and held her wolf through 3 nights and not let go. You asked if I wish the confession had stayed buried. Here is my answer. In my own words, out loud. The way you always let me. No, I choose this. Not the wrong. I didn't choose the wrong. No one chooses to be branded for another's crime, and it took 12 years from me I'll never get back. But this. Being believed instead of blamed. Being asked instead of judged. Being held through the dark instead of surviving it alone. Standing at the edge of this meadow with you, and a whole pack that would never cast me out, instead of splitting my own wood alone in a valley till I died unmourned. I choose all of it, the crown and the weight, and the hard work of tending a north, because it's mine, and it's true, and I am, and for once she did not let the sentence trail off. I am not a cast-out thing. I never was. I was only an innocent girl, the world was too grieved and too lazy to believe, and I survived it, and I am here, and I am chosen, and I would not trade 1 hour of this hard true life to be safely, cleanly, proudly alone in my valley ever again. And Torin took her hand, and they stood together at the edge of the high meadow in the long gold light, and Aveline turned her wrist over, the way she did sometimes now, and looked at the old exile brand there. She had never had it removed, though it could have been. She wore it still, faded and pale. The mark Stagmere had burned into a girl of 16, to say cast out, to say no pack will have you, to say die in the wilds where you belong. And she understood that she had made it mean the opposite of what they intended. It was not the mark of a woman the world threw away. It was the mark of a woman the world could not kill, branded and cast out and left for dead. And here, 3 winters on, a queen at the edge of a gold meadow with a pack that would die for her, and a man who had ridden a winter to find her, wearing the brand of her exile like a thing survived, like a thing outlived, like the proof that they had done their worst to her at 16, and she had lived, and built, and been believed at last, and chosen. She would not have it removed. She wanted it there, faded and plain, to the last of her days, the mark that had meant thrown away, worn now by the one who had refused to be, over the pulse of a wrist that was warm and alive and, at last, entirely her own.